Hey there, Wanderer. Welcome to the premiere episode of Season 2 of The Corner of Story and Game. I'm your host, Gerald Ford, and I am thrilled to kick off this season with a new old friend, the extraordinary Crowe Whitney. Crowe is not just a fellow dream chaser, although armed with a game design degree, but a narrative designer, tabletop role player, a Twitch streamer, and a writer. At their core, Crowe is a storyteller with a love for improvisation and collaboration. So grab that chair by the fire and let's dig into this. Crowe, thanks for joining me.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Can you kick this whole thing off? I mean, this is season 2. This is brand new and all different. We're going to go deeper and dive into stuff. Can you start the whole season off with who is Crowe? How did you get here? What's your journey so far? Give us a little background.
Be absolutely honored to. I'm Crowe Whitney, aka Hex Noblesse. I am a narrative designer, Twitch streamer, and interdisciplinary artist. I have a bachelor's in fine arts from Maryland Institute College of Art in game design. I'm also I was part of the first nomadic branch of Trust and Play, which is a urban games exploration into playful stuff. Lots of like LARP and interactive like experiences.
Oh, live play kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I do a lot of things. I like to wear a lot of hats, as they say in the industry. I like to get my fingers in all the little pies.
Did you game a lot as a little one, as a little Crowe? Did?
Yeah, absolutely. A little fledgling. My parents are big gamers. Little Crowe.
There's got to be like a name for a baby Crowe. I don't know what it is. I'll look it up.
I don't know what it is either.
I'll work it. Sorry, your parents were big gamers. They brought you into the fold.
Yes, absolutely. My mom was a big raider in World of Warcraft. Like one of the best like raiding guilds or whatever. I've got some fun stories about that. And my dad also big in World of Warcraft. Also big in World of Warcraft, but also just would sit and play games, and I would watch as a little baby. My first kind of memory, my fond memory of a game that I truly loved and watching my dad play was Wind Waker, Legend of Zelda. That's kind of when I started to also take the reins and actually like play the games. So it has a near and dear spot in my heart. Nice. But like learning to type as a little baby, there was a game, my parents talk about this every now and then, where it was called Key Whack, and it would make different noises when you press different keys, and that was just the kind of like playful little game for babies. So, nice. Gaming's in my blood, as I say.
Did you play tabletop stuff, board games, role playing? When did you get into that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I played Dungeons and Dragons. My dad would run little things here and there, but then also some friends of mine in school, I would go to his house. And his dad would run D&D for us. It was AD&D at first. Mm-hmm. And we would do that, I think every week, but it's so long ago. Maybe it was not every week, but it felt like every week. And we would play for a couple hours and then take a break and run around with some Nerf guns. It was a lot of fun. And then I started to like play around with we would take turns like GMing for a little bit. And so that was like my first really bad foray into GMing. Lots of things I learned that were not fun.
I'm always curious with young DMs or GMs. Did you jump into world building right away, or did you use pre-built stuff for the first while?
I jumped right into like homebrew.
As I would have guessed, yeah.
I actually have never ran anything from a module. I've played modules, but I've never run from a module.
You've never ran Ravenloft?
No.
Like Castle? Like, you...
I have not.
Because playing it's one experience, but running Strahd, that's a whole nother.
I haven't played any Ravenloft. Actually, we're gonna go on a tangent on this for a little bit. I want to play Curse of Strahd so badly. I've been wanting to play my entire life. I've never gotten to.
I feel a stream being born here, right here, right now. Curse of Strahd streamed adventure.
I know that I would do. Just please. So I know that I would run it really well. I think I've never run I've never run.
You can run it and I'll play.
But I think it would be great. But I think for my first interaction with Curse of Strahd, I'm very good at avoiding things. I know a little bit about Curse of Strahd. I know who Strahd is. I know some pieces, but I know really nothing about the actual game of it. So I've been I want to play it first, because if I GM, then I know all the intricacies, I know all the secrets, I know all the twists and turns. I want to play it so badly.
It is so rare to find somebody who's deep into D&D who doesn't know the lore behind Strahd and the history behind Barovia. And
I know a little bit, but yeah,
but not enough to spoil it.
Not enough to spoil it. And it is my white whale, as it were. Especially with how beloved vampires are to me.
Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna come back to that another day. That's something else. What drew you into narrative design? Where did that passion for storytelling come from?
We've gotten into this a little bit. I've always kind of been interested in stories and storytelling, and a big part of my life growing up was having my nose in books, playing games, running around in the woods with my friends, LARPing essentially, as kids do. But in regards to narrative design in particular, when I found out that I could go into game development, which was in high school, I'm going to do that. And I went to college for game design. And I had a very generalist education, which I wanted. I wanted a very generalist education because I wanted to learn about all the different aspects and all of the different areas of game development, instead of just focusing on just asset creation and just being a cog in a machine. And my sophomore year of college is when I took our one narrative design class, which I was very excited for. And we had a talk by Ian Dallas from Giant Sparrow, who is the creative director on What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where things started to click into place in regards to, this is the kind of stuff I want to do. This is the area of game development that I truly am passionate about. And because he talked about creating an experience and wrapping it all in an emotion and an essence and a vibe, and cultivating that. And he was talking about it as a creative director, but I think that focusing on that aspect of specifically narrative design and kind of taking all the pieces to wrap up in a little neat package to really make the experience shine, just hooked my brain somewhere, and I was like, that's it. That's what I want.
That's the drug. Hook me up. Right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel that one. So as we mentioned, we've both taken the narrative department masterclass. We took one at separate times, and then we took the pilot of 2 recently, which was one hell of an experience.
Incredible.
It was. From both of those, what did you take away that will now shape your understanding of narrative design moving forward? How did those classes change you as a writer and designer?
I think the first things that really jump to me is, one, the story stack structure. And considering those, that has just a flow to it that just makes sense to me. From even just
that. So the listener knows, what is the story stack?
So the story stack is essentially this foundational pyramid of hierarchy. So it starts with the player fantasy. So when I talk about narrative design and creating a whole little bow to tie everything together, the player fantasy is that emotion you want to elicit. It's the what as a player are you looking for and want to do in the game?
Right.
And what's the essence? What's the core, basically? And then you have actions, which are mechanics. What are you doing in the game? What are the actions in the game? And then that moves into economy. And economy is the one that trips a lot of people up. But I think taking a look at it from a game design perspective is really good, where it's not economy as in resources. It can, but it's more in terms of what's your level structure? Do you have levels, or is it more like open world freeform? What is the goal structure? Is there a win state, a lose state? What does it mean to progress in the game? Like for example, like leveling up. What does that look like? How often does it happen? Stuff like that. Right. So it's basically taking those actions, taking those mechanics, and what's the design of it? Like, how does those interact with the gameplay and the rewards and such? And then you have the world. So what is the setting? What is the bubble that all of that can take place in and takes place and makes sense that it takes place in? And then lastly, the most flexible, what is the story the game is telling? And you can have games that don't have any like story per se in terms of like a plot, but there still is some sort of story. So that's the story stack. It flows into each other, I think, quite nicely. I think a lot of people agree because we all cheer and applaud the story stack.
It's nice to have structure to something that can often be so fluid and creative. It's nice to have, okay, I need to make sure this works with this and this, and I got to make sure this is here. And it's nice to have structure. Yeah. Constraints help creativity.
In school, we would have the game design document. We had like a structure that our professor set. And I think that the story stack just makes more sense in regards to what is the game you are making. Whereas the like game design document, the game Bible structure that I had been used to in the past is a lot more like what assets are going into the game and like what's more important in regards to like especially asset creation so that you can get things done on time. So it's a lot more production based.
Yeah.
Whereas the story stack is to the project as an entity.
It's interesting that in a narrative design class, we're taught out of all this structure, the thing that technically is the least important or most flexible is the story. Yeah. Which at first blows your mind, but then you stop and you back up and you go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so be it. And we're
building a game, we're building an experience, not just a plot.
Otherwise we'd write novels, which
exactly
might do that too. Okay, so one of the conversations we had quite often in that class was the balance between player agency and the ability to do what you want and coming up with a crafted or at least cultivated or curated narrative experience that has emotional payoff or resonance. And we've had this conversation many times, but I don't know if I ever got your take on that dilemma of player agency versus crafted narrative experience.
Yeah, I wrote in my preparation for this, I wrote a lot.
This is your cue to go for it.
This is something that I'm thinking about a lot, even beyond video games, kind of with all play in general. And specifically for narratives, there's a lot of different styles of narratives that can be in games. Whereas a book, it's a linear story for the most part. You can get a little creative with it in that format. But games are so much like bigger and more flexible.
Yeah.
And I think in regards to balancing player agency and like a crafted narrative, there are tips and tricks for the different styles. But the goal, it should be to have kind of every piece of your game call back to that in that core that you want, the player experience, the player fantasy. And so the player can interact with that vibe. And there are certain things that make sense, like in a zombie game, you have a lot of these themes of like decay and like you'll have a vibe that kind of falls that, which can be played with, which I think can be kind of fun. But there are expectations and genre like staples or pillars that you can play around with and kind of guide the player through. So in a linear story, there's still, you can open it up to be a little bit more, at least the illusion of player agency. Have you heard of, in a lot of games, you hear about like the illusion of choice?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I think when it is crafted well, you can't tell that you didn't actually have a choice. In certain games, you see like, oh, I have two answers, and then no matter which one I picked, the response is the same, and players can find that out really easily.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that when you give, like when the illusion is sold, the player feels way like they have more agency than they really did.
Right. But every game has a level of illusion of choice. Like there, even live D&D, there's a limit to what you can do and still hold the whole thing together. So when you sit down to play a game, you're entering into that space of, okay, I'm accepting, I am only going to be able to operate within this much inside of Baldur's Gate 3. This is my space. I'm not going to be able to head down to Kalimshan or over to Nethril. But by entering as a player, as a gamer, we're accepting that to a degree, right? Am I? Right?
Yeah, I think that there's some sort of understanding that you can't do everything. Like the flexibility, like that would just be a massive project that people aim for and developers try to do all the time to varying levels of success. I was just talking about, actually, you bring up Baldur's Gate. I'm playing a warlock in Baldur's Gate, and one of the companions, Will, is a warlock, and his patron comes up and is a part of his story. And I really wish my patron would come up, but I'd recognize that would just be too much. The game's already massive.
Yeah, that would be cool, though. So
it would be cool.
I mean, the fact that they had to take Dispel Magic out alone, obviously there's a limitation on how much agency you have. And it's a balance, but that's part of the game, right?
Yeah, I think in tabletop roleplay games too, I've talked about this on my stream in the past, how player agency in improvisational, but also just collaborative storytelling in general, there's two like ends where you have what is referred to as railroading, and then what you have referred to as just like free roam. Sandbox. That's a good word for it. And I personally think you want to aim towards the middle, because if you are just railroading, you're taking away all player agency, and often you should just write a book. Some players would be fine with that. There's definitely like people that are totally okay with that kind of play. Mm-hmm. But in regards to player agency, there is none. Sandbox style is very difficult to pull off, especially in improvisational standpoint, because if your players don't know what is around them, they literally could do anything, then they are spoiled for choice. Mm-hmm. And you can't really tell a story or have a thoroughfare without kind of taking the reins a little bit and pulling them in and having some sort of like, oh, this thing's happening. Do you want to interact with that? Mm-hmm. Or here's the world that you're in, and this is what's going on around you.
So an important part of being a writer and a designer is to ensure that we are including everyone. We're being inclusive and allowing diverse voices space at the table. We're holding space for the people who normally didn't get space historically. How important is that to you? Is it a personal thing? I'm sure it is. And how do you ensure that? What kind of tools or methods can we use to ensure that as writers and game designers?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. Our world in general is incredibly diverse, and our narratives should match that. And any narrative that doesn't, and this might be a hot take to some, but any narrative that doesn't reflect that diversity is sending a very clear message, and whether that is intentional or not, that is irrelevant. you don't like, you are sending that message regardless. And so you have to purposefully take ownership of that and bring the diversity, whether that's players at your table, whether that's just you're working on a solo project and you share it with the world and talk to people and learn about other people's experiences. I'm one person with my own experiences and my own life. And so it's incredibly important to me to meet people and talk to people from like all different walks of life in order to learn about and then be able to not necessarily just straight up pull and steal, but like have those things in mind in regards to creating diverse worlds and diverse narratives. Thankfully, I love collaboration. and simply collaboration is the easiest way to pull in diversity, is you pull people with those lived experiences, and then just it'll come as a byproduct of that.
That makes sense. You've worked on a number of projects in the past. Do any of those jump out of your mind as, hey, we had a lot of voices involved here, or we were able to include diverse voices, or are there some that you were disappointed in because the powers that be didn't allow diverse voices?
A lot of my projects are with very small teams or solo projects. But I think that my time with Trust and Play, talking about urban games, as well as my project called A Town by the Sea. Mm-hmm. Trust and Play was, and I was part of the nomadic branch, which there's a couple different branches that are geographical, but the branch that I was a part of was all across the world. We had people from, I can't remember all the places, but we had some people from Georgia, like the country and not the state. Yeah. We had people from Sweden, I believe. We had people from Greece. There was a Athens branch. This was across the EU, as partnership with the EU. Okay. And so there was only 3 people from the US, which was me and 2 of my friends from my school. We had people from Italy, of Romania, all over the place. And it was a wonderful experience to meet everyone. I went to Athens for a week for a little like summit there, where we just did a bunch of workshops and talked and created small little experiences there. It was a wonderful time.
That's
wonderful. Magical. I think about it all the time. And then A Town by the Sea was a project for a what is a COESCO pilot, collaborative engagement on societal issues, funded by the European Commission, that I was brought on as a game designer, contractor, consultant. That's the word. Where we created a game about sea level rising, and a little tabletop role playing game that an ethnographer could witness how people play and act and role play in this space where over time their home is being taken by the sea, and how that these landmarks that they had made and were important to their community were changing over time. And that project, there was only 3 of us working on it, but it was me as a white queer person. There was Viditya Valedi, who is who is of Indian descent, still from the US, and then Matteo Uguzzoni, who's from Italy, who is in charge of the project, and talking to a bunch of people from Edge Riders, which is a company that Matteo works with, and connecting to people across the EU. It was also very exciting project.
Done some fun stuff.
And only hope to do more.
Oh, it's coming. Okay, so I want to. The whole point of this episode the premiere of season 2, I wanted to talk about a little bit of 2023 and looking forward into 2024. But before we get to that, I do want to know, because you stream on Twitch.
I do.
I'm curious, the process of streaming a game like Baldur's Gate 3, because I know you have streamed it, and what...
I'm streaming it actively.
Are you in the process? How does that, the act of streaming, how does that influence A, your enjoyment of the game, and B, your perspective of narrative design now that you've had, chat in the back of your head talking to you as you go through the process and forcing you to slow down and pay attention?
Yeah, I think that although I'm pretty new to at least this iteration of my stream, it's been really great talking to chat and having chat ask questions about what do I think about this. I go on a lot of tangents in my stream. There will be times, especially at the beginning of a stream, where I'm like, this is what's been going on. This is how my D&D session went. I GM every Tuesday, so my Wednesday streams always have a this is what happened. And we have a little running joke where we don't actually get to the game for an hour.
That's cool though.
And
allows you to get to know your chat. Sorry, took me a minute to get there.
Exactly. And we have conversations about if I'm like, oh, I think this is really interesting, or here's a little lesson on the level design here. In like we just finished Eastward a little bit ago, and I would just stop and be like, I really like this. I like this design choice, or I see what they were going for here, and it's kind of going over my head a little bit. And talking about design and little insights into what I think at least they're trying to do in these games, or things that I just think are particularly neat. And so there are people in my chat who are more familiar with game development or less familiar with game development. And so it can kind of start to become a conversation about just how these things are made and what's going on in people's heads as they're making choices, or, oh, I wish they were doing this instead.
One thing I like about your stream is you'll be having conversations about the game you're playing, and then chat will start chiming up. And if people don't know, they don't realize some of those are professional narrative designers who are just hanging out with Crowe, and they're like throwing out wisdom. And if you don't know, you're like, how does this person know so much? But it's actually, I'm not going to throw names around, but it's professionals. It's cool. You know how they say the best way to remember something you learn is to teach it. I'm curious if that same principle applies to the best way to learn narrative design and game development and these little bits and pieces is through the process of explaining them to chat. Basically, you're in front of a classroom as you're going through playing a game, and you stop and you go, hey, this is why they made this choice here, and this is why they allowed a bottleneck there, and that makes you a better narrative designer because you're running a stream.
I definitely think so. Absolutely. I think that that's been on my mind a while. I love talking about and explaining these concepts that I'm still sometimes some I'm like an expert on. I know the intricacies so well, and some that I'm like, ooh, what is this? Like I'm still learning. I'm still at the beginning of my career, and I find that I'm learning more and more every day from the narrative department or otherwise. And I think also this idea of like the anonymity of chat, or you don't know who's in chat. You don't know that there are some really wonderful, creative professionals in my chat, and people who are just silly little guys that happen to be friends of mine or not.
All hanging out together.
It's kind of it equalizes it.
Nice.
And it brings people up to a level. We're all here together, and we all bring each other up and hold each other up in a way that we're all learning, and it's all fascinating.
That's beautiful, buddy. Okay, let's talk about the year that has gone by. 2023, may it die forever. Okay, so first of all, what are some of your takeaways from 2023 as far as industry and trends? And then let's put 2023 to bed with what were your top 3 games.
2023 was a turbulent year. But I think that there's a lot of conversation to be said about like lots of layoffs. Just the whole shenanigan with AI that is ever present in our day-to-day lives, as well as like more negative things. But I do think there are some positive trends that I want to take note on, where again with diversity, we are seeing people give space to voices that have been unheard, as well as those like marginalized groups taking space that is deserved. Yep. And we're also seeing a trend of people coming to learn that corporations are not people and do not have the feelings of people, and business and creativity are not the same. And what's good for a business is, dare I say, often not good for creativity.
If we're on the same page.
And so it's good to see people claim that. And I think we're also seeing focus on community and uplifting each other. And I'm very interested in radical love and radical care. And so seeing a lot of people kind of moving towards that, where it's like, we are in it together. We have to take our space and we have to use our voice instead of waiting for the opportunity, because the opportunity will not be handed to us. But also sometimes it is. Like, I think sometimes people are like, yes, here's the opportunity. Please come and talk. But that's still at like a smaller indie level. But I think people are starting to understand the importance of it. Even like, I know Final Fantasy 14, a game that I love and have been playing a lot of, it's throughout 2023 and before and forevermore. There's a focus on bringing people on, bringing marginalized voices to make sure that things are being done with care and with respect, and also that they exist in the first place.
Nice. Well then, there we go. Positive. 2023, there were positives. We are moving in the right direction in some ways. Yes.
It's been an uphill battle from time to time, but I think that trend will continue as well into 2024.
I like to believe that all of this horrible turbulence that is upsetting a lot of lives, maybe the good thing that'll come out of it is there will be a sudden growth, an explosion of smaller indie studios and communal studios, and just people getting together and making cool things without the claws of capitalism causing corruption throughout it. Like that's me hoping, I guess.
Yeah.
I
hope the same.
So what were your top 3 games in 2023?
There's a lot of games that came out in 2023 that I did not get to play and I look forward to, but Baldur's Gate 3 has to have a mention. It's finally sunk its claws into me. It took a really long time. But boy howdy, it's got its claws in deep. I am not that far into it, and because I'm streaming it, so I'm going very slowly, but it's been really fun. Lethal Company has been a really fun co-op experience. It's really fun to stream too. I think it has a good balance of horror and comedy. And like the tension spikes at certain moments, but still has room for hilarity.
It's on my list.
And then I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan, have been my whole life. As I mentioned, Wind Waker.
Yeah.
So Tears of the Kingdom was always going to hit really hard.
So Lethal Company, it was made by one person?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
A game that's doing that well, one person. What does the message that say? Anybody can make a game.
Anyone. You just have an idea and you have the motivation and the gung-ho.
Do it.
You can do it.
Do it. Right. 2024. Moving into 2024. Let's put on our goggles here and look into the future. What do you think is coming as far as trends in the narrative design space, the storytelling space? What do you think is coming? What's
a little bit starting in 2023 that I think is going to really shine. Cozy games. This idea that this moving away from the power fantasy that's been in the trend for the last few years, getting into some more nuanced narratives, a lot more diverse, moving away from like your standard cookie cutter, like vaguely white European fantasy, or playing within that and having some cool changes. A lot of this may also be hope, but I do think that people really love a cozy game.
I've noticed, and even amongst the people who aren't huge into gaming, there's more and more people talking about like visual novels, narrative only structured, narrative branching novel type experiences, especially in the romance space. Apparently, that it's something that you're seeing as well. Is that on the uptick?
Dating sims. One of my first forays into streaming was streaming dating sims way back in high school. And I think that they have been, I definitely think back in the day, it was something that people were like, this is a guilty pleasure. I'm not talking about this with anyone. Right. And now people are way more open, and there's some really exciting stuff coming up that, again, has these like darker, nuanced like stuff in dating sims, but beyond the like classic, just toxic dating sim romances that are kind of just like not taken in like a good light, that they're like, oh yes, this is a perfectly good, wonderful relationship. It's like, no. But we're seeing things that kind of explore relationships and interpersonal things in dating sims or in visual novels in a way that I think is really fun and exciting.
Interesting. Are there games you're looking forward to?
Touch Starved. The aesthetic of it is incredibly up my alley.
Nice. Something to look forward to. Cool. All right. Well,
another quick thing coming out in 2024 that I'm incredibly excited about, and everyone would be so shocked if I didn't bring it up. The new expansion for Final Fantasy XIV, Dawn Trail.
I played that for all of a month maybe, and then I couldn't get into the. So what is the theme behind Dawn Trail? What's the pitch line there? It's
kind of like a summer vacation almost. The storyline of Final Fantasy XIV in the previous expansion, Endwalker, literally marked the end of the entire, like, a major arc. And so now it's kind of starting to sow the seeds of a new major arc, but also serving as you've been through a lot. Endwalker was really tough. Go have a little vacation.
That's cool.
It's gonna be exciting. I think it's gonna be really fun.
Do you play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV?
I do. Not in the last few days, but it is a game I've sunk a lot of hours into.
We all have one of those. Okay, let's tackle the question that lives at the core of this podcast. And that is, in my opinion, there is a magical space in the center of where storycraft and game design meet, narrative design, but also performers, poets, artists, entertainers, voice actors, all these people. We can all come together and effortlessly just talk and hang out and get to know each other. There is something about that space that pulls us all together. In your opinion, what is the common thread there?
So, I think this is a concept that I think a lot about. It is the concept of the magic circle, which is coined for LARP experience, live action role-playing experiences. But I think the magic circle exists for every form of play, every form of anything. You can have even just like getting ready to go to the corporate hellscape of work. there's rituals that you do to get ready for these things. And that ritual is entering a magic circle of sorts. And I think that aspect of, for play at the very least, so when even just interacting with a book or a movie or narratives in general, you enter in and you sign the contract of, I am entering in this space.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of where anyone interested in play, which it's a part of the human nature, so I would be boldly claim everyone in the world. The aspect of the magic circle and those rituals and those agreements, that like social contract of sorts, there's something esoteric and just soul gripping where it chips away at all of your defenses, and it really reaches you at your core. And then those commonalities between people is also where we can just bypass all of that. And you see this, like, if you are like, oh, I love this movie, and someone's like, oh, I love that movie too. Like, you can you get through all of the like societal walls everyone's built up a little bit, and you get at this like nature, like this human nature, like pure essence of it, of the soul.
So by agreeing to that social contract and entering the sacred circle, you're basically opening your true self up to connect with other people.
Yeah, or an inner child, some might say. And I think that our society survives on, or loves to like shut people away and put everyone in their own individual box. And this is, again, connects to community. And through community, we enter in these social contracts and enter in these fun like explorations of the self and just play. And it doesn't even have to be so deep and so complex. It can be just as simple as we're having a good time, and you can melt those away. And so this intersection between media and stories and playfulness is where connection and care and community is born. And everyone wants to form those connections with people. People claim like humans are a social creature, and that certainly is true. And I think that loneliness is a problem in our world. That's why people gravitate towards games and stories as either a form of escapism or as just a way to connect with themes and experiences beyond our own, or even understanding our own experiences at a deeper level. You can kind of start to grasp at an understanding that is hard to put to words.
Well, my follow-up question to that typically is, then why are stories and games important? But you kind of answered that. So I'm going to take it for a little twist, and I'm going to say, with all that considered, what kind of onus does that put on storytellers and game creators, considering how important stories and games are?
I think that something in the industry that I would love to see more is getting rid of the separation between art and games. I think a lot of people view games as a commodity, as something to be sold, when and a lot of people treat art the same way. And I think that stories, when you think about the history of storytelling and the history of art in general, it's been ever present. It will always exist. And storytellers and artists in general serve as a conduit to, as I kind of touched upon before, a conduit to explore concepts and themes and problems of the world and try to tackle them and discuss them and put them out into the world for everyone to see and say, hey, this is our experience, this is our world, this is who we are. And so the onus of storytellers and thus game designers and game developers as artists is to not shy away from the ugly truth of the world that evil exists.
Yeah.
And you can't just focus on positives. You can't focus on these like fake realities. There's a part for that to play, but if we ignore it and if we just are blind to it, we start to tune out voices of anyone, everyone, and things will not change or get to the better. And so it's important to take the struggles of the world and the complexities of the world and return them back for people to experience and understand and learn about.
Do you think it's important to keep in mind that because stories and games are so old, like they're the first evolutionary tools of humanity, we need to remember that they still evolve. Like they are still changing. They are, sure, 30 years ago, a video game might have been story-free and nothing more than a commodity, but over time they've evolved into an art form, and they're going to continue to evolve into an artistic experience and a life-changing, paradigm-shifting something that happens to you as opposed to just a commodity. So we need to keep that in mind. We need to use that as a framework for the development of games moving forward.
Exactly. And that it's not just, there's a power to games in regards to if they are an experience where you can watch a movie and you can see, or you can read a book and you can say, yes, I understand what these words mean. I understand what these words are saying. But games give you control in a way that no other medium can.
Right.
And so you can fully experience things, and the more immersive, which games don't have to be immersive, that's a whole conversation for another time.
We'll do it. Yep, we'll do that.
The importance of experiences and experiencing things that are uncomfortable broaden our world and give the attention to how beautifully complex everything is.
I remember when I was young, I don't know, in my early teens or late preteens, I used to read a lot of books out of the library because I was a very lonely kid. And one of my religious family members said, hey, you shouldn't be reading those books. And I remember a quote, and I wish I could remember who said it, that you should only read books that make you cut or bleed. The books that in some way change you, shape you, hurt you, make you grow. So I think that applies to games too, but that's just me. Maybe I'm just dark and twisted.
I love that. It connects to the earlier topic of diversity and just collaborating and learning about everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's enough deep and dark. Let's start heading out the door here. Let's do what I like to call the quick fire round, because I'm so original and I can come up with titles. What are you playing these days?
Always Final Fantasy 14, Baldur's Gate 3. I'm in the beta for a game called Once Human. That's a survival experience. It's very fun. Lots of stuff on my list, including The Long Dark, which I'm very excited to play.
Play it. Do the story mode. It's really fun.
I'll have to.
Mark Mears' voice acting is fantastic. I'm curious, have you tried Synced that our classmate Liv wrote on? It's actually kind of fun.
I haven't yet. There's so many things I want to do, but that's on my list. I should get to it soon. I really should.
Like looter shooter, extraction-esques. It's really fun. Yeah, it's a good time. What is your favorite game world? And this could be video game, tabletop role playing, even books if you want, but let's stick with games maybe.
I feel like this is a cop out to say my own.
No, just your claim.
I have a homebrew world for my tabletop role playing games. It's technically setting agnostic, but I'm running D&D in it right now. It's called MCOs, and it is ever present in my mind.
Yeah, I've been doing that. Let's see here. 38 years now. It never goes away. Nope, never.
I've been working on it for a couple of years now, and I can't wait to see it in 50 years.
As long as you have fun with it, that's what matters. What is an iconic line from a video game that still haunts you to this day?
Probably Undertale's "Despite everything, it's still you." That's the first one came to my mind. It's a good one.
What are you reading these days?
I'm reading Witch Hat Atelier and Skip and Loafer, which are two manga that are really, really good. I'm also reading Player vs. Monster by Jaroslav Spelch. Don't know exactly how to pronounce the name, but it's a very interesting read about games and monsters in games and how they've evolved over time. As well as if I can find my copy of Prairie of the Orange Tree, I have to chip away at that. That's like 900 pages of just gorgeousness.
Well, in your opinion, what are 3 books every writer or game maker or narrative designer should have on their bookshelf?
This is another cop-out. I don't have any specific titles in mind, but I would say to try to read across genre and format. I think that is the best way to kind of get a broad idea of narrative.
Beautiful. All right. Last one. If you could sit down with any 4 people from any time, living or dead, and play a game at a table, or even in front of a computer screens on a LAN or whatever, who would those 4 people be, and what would you play?
So I had to think a lot about this because there are so many people out there I would love to sit at the table with, all of them living, big and small, just tons of people. I had to narrow it down to specifically for tabletop role-playing games and as a GM. I would love to play with like big name GMs out there right now: Abria Iyengar, Matthew Mercer, Brennan Lee Mulligan, and Connie Chang. I think that I'm a pretty good GM. I'd like to think that. My players certainly agree. And I just think that would be an amazing experience.
No doubt. That would be crazy. Even just to watch that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've never given that question a serious thought myself, and I'm still working on my answer. But it is. But the opportunity to sit Neil Gaiman and Edgar Allan Poe at a table together, I'm still working on the other 2, but just the 2 of them, like, that would be cool. Anyways, that's just me. Again, dark, twisted. Okay, we're almost done. We're going to walk our way out the door right away here. But first, do you have any current news or projects, anything you're working on that you want to put out into the world?
As has been mentioned a few times, I stream on Twitch. I'm currently working through Baldur's Gate 3. It's hex_noblesse.
There'll be links.
There will be links. Thank you so much. I'm currently working on some cool like stream overlays and graphic design stuff to get a little bit more professional in it. It's been a fun little exploration of I'm allowing myself to be new and messy and bad at it.
Good. Yeah, that's the best way to learn.
It's been a lot of fun.
Nice.
Some fun bits of insight into my setting MCOs. And the pantheon that I created within to come out. Maybe some charity D&D streams in the future or some actual plays. I don't know. We'll see.
I know some. What? Sorry, go on. I didn't say that.
And then I'm working on a solo project right now, which is an interactive fiction game currently titled Your Beloved. It's based on the fairy tale Bluebeard, where you explore the mansion of your beloved and perhaps learn about his descent into madness and the toxic tragedy that claimed the lives of 6 previous spouses. It's going to be dark and twisted. It's going to be really cool.
No, okay, I'm sold. Just for a second, narrative design nerd, I'm curious, what are you, Twine, Ink, Artisy?
I started with Twine. This was for my Masterclass 1 Twine game project. I might be switching to Ink. I haven't decided. I'm kind of like pulling it away and like kind of making it something a little bit bigger. The scope creep is happening. I'm like trying to keep it manageable, but right now it's in Twine. We'll see.
Cool. You know how I mentioned the best way to remember something is to learn? I use that like in my corporate career and everything. So after Masterclass 1 and 2, I took my son, who wants to someday become a programmer, video game developer, level developer. And the two of us have started just for fun going through the process using Playful Process, the book, and use stuff that we got from Susan. And we're going through, right now we're in Blue Sky, and it looks like it's going to be a roguelike. He's big, like, so it's fun to just wander off and scope creep. Good Lord, we'll spend an hour just wandering down side trails, but it is fun bonding.
It's fun.
And we both are learning, and the kid's smart. He's already taught himself 2 languages, and he's only 13, so.
That's incredible.
If Scratch is a language. I don't know if Scratch is actually a language, but anyways, another day. Okay. That's what you got going on, and the links to find you will be below. So, before I close up shop and turn down the fire, do you have any closing thoughts, words of wisdom? I'm going to give you the final word on the first episode of season 2. Hit me with it, Crowe.
I think the most important thing that I've learned and I want to impart into others is that creating is a terrifying experience, where, especially when you start to share that work with the world. But I have been sharing my work and everyone's been loving it, and I've been getting wonderful feedback, even critique. Is people interacting with your work in a way that simply has no comparison in regards to the feeling of it. And anyone who wants to create something, do not let your fears slow you down, because fear and perfectionism, which, as Susan has said in the past, is a form of fear, only has your head, the thoughts in your head, stopping you from success and from creating something honestly truly beautiful. And there's things out there that I've made that I'm like, oh, this is simple, this is straightforward, this is nothing special. And people look at it with fresh eyes and they see something that is beautiful and unique and spectacular. So you'll never know how people take the stuff you do without sharing it. So get out there, get creating, and I can't wait to see what everyone is up to.
I think I just heard the 13th toll of the Eldritch Clock, which means it's time for us to go. Before we do, thank you to Crowe for taking the time to sit down and share his insights and wisdom. And to you, dear patrons of my mystical tavern here, thank you for taking that seat by the fire. If this journey through the realm of storytelling and gaming has left a smile on your face, please leave a review, tell the other members of your party about the podcast, and hey, maybe enchant that subscribe button there before you head out the door. Be sure to come back for the next episode when I sit down with Will Shen, the lead content designer at Something Wicked Games, working on Weird Song. It's a game I'm really excited about, and I cannot wait to pick Will's brain about world building in the fantasy video game. So until next time, may your stories be woven with wonder and your games filled with adventure. Safe travels, Wanderer. I cannot wait to see you next time here at the Corner of Story and Game.